If your doorbell rings after midnight and no one's on the camera, don't answer. That's the first thing I learned the month my neighbor disappeared. Our street looks like the kind of place where mystery gets bored and moves away. A short cul-de-sac, 5 porch swings, 3 retirees who water the sidewalk more than the lawns. Dogs know each other by name. Packages sit all afternoon and never go missing. We wave here, half the time for real, half the time to keep the illusion alive. Then there was the man in the end house, the one with the cedar that leans like it's listening. He introduced himself as Mr. Hale when he moved in. Late 40s, polite, tan line where a wedding ring used to be. He kept odd hours and had the calm of someone who can wait out a storm without checking the forecast. He wasn't unfriendly. He was precise. He trimmed his hedges with a level. He carried a canvas bag with the same 3 items: seltzer, batteries, and sunflower seeds. He spent 20 minutes every morning feeding the sparrows like a ritual, sprinkling seeds in a pattern that looked random until you saw it twice. For weeks, that was the story: quiet neighbor, quiet street. Then the pattern started to show through. At 1:11 a.m. on Tuesdays, a light in his attic blinked 3 times. On Thursdays, he wheeled a small case from his trunk, left it on the porch for exactly 7 minutes, then took it inside. On Saturdays, a rusted pickup idled at the corner, lights off, no one getting out, no one getting in. The first time I noticed, I chalked it up to coincidence. The second time felt like choreography. The third time felt like a message, and I didn't know who it was for. I wouldn't have cared if not for the package. A small brown box arrived with his name, my address. No return label, just a city I couldn't place. When I went to hand it over, he opened the door 2 inches and slid the chain across without looking. "For you," I said. He studied the label like it might lie. "Thank you," he said, meeting my eyes in a way that made me feel catalogued. Height, posture, keys in left pocket, phone in right. He reached, paused, and then, "Would you mind setting it on the mat? I'll grab it after." It wasn't rude, exactly. It was careful. Still, curiosity pushed. "What is it?" I asked lightly. "You get fun mail. Mine's just bills." "A mistake," he said. "Almost always a mistake." He closed the door with the kind of gentle finality that doesn't invite follow-ups. That night, the attic blinked at 1:11 again. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. I watched from my kitchen window, telling myself I was just drinking water. My sink faces his house. I had never noticed that felt like a vantage point until then. 2 weeks later, the humming started. At first I thought it was an appliance dying slowly, something in his condenser or an old freezer trying to remember how to be cold. But this hum came and went at strange intervals, like it had a schedule only it respected. At 2:03 a.m., it started. At 2:07, it stopped. At 2:11, it came back, lower, like someone whispering through metal. And then the doorbell rang. I checked the camera, nothing but dark, rain turning the street lamp into a halo. Another ring. I opened the app to speak through the intercom, and before I could, a voice, not close, not far, said, "Don't open." I froze. Who is this? Static, street, wind. Then, "You're not the one they want." Mr. Hale's porch light flared, then died. I didn't sleep. Not because of the voice, but because of what it meant. The street wasn't as empty as it looked at night, and attention was moving like weather. The next day I told myself I'd ignore it. I told myself the healthy thing to do would be to mind my business. I ate breakfast on the porch anyway. That's when I noticed the bird feeder. It wasn't a feeder like the others on our block. It was a dull metal cylinder with no decorative anything, bolted to a post at knee height, barely visible from the street. The sparrows swarmed it every morning when Mr. Hale fed them. Today, a note was taped under the lid. I wouldn't have seen it if the wind hadn't tried to steal it, a small white corner flapping like a flag asking for rescue. I walked over because my conscience wanted a reason to be involved. The note was sealed in plastic, labeled in neat block letters. "If I'm gone, check the mailbox brick." That was it. No name. No dear neighbor. No instructions for who I was. But who else could it be? I didn't check the mailbox brick then. I put the note back where I found it, closed the lid, and told myself I was imagining things. I didn't sleep the next night either. 3 days later, Mr. Hale vanished. It wasn't dramatic. No screams. No glass. The kind of disappearing that looks like moving unless you look closely. His car sat in the driveway. His porch chair was where it always was. But the house had that emptied feeling you can't fake. The curtains too straight, the air behind the windows a little too still. I knocked. No answer. Through the sidelight I saw the spine of a bookshelf and nothing else. By quitting time, the block had a story to replace the silence. "New job," one neighbor said. "Family emergency," another tried. "He was odd," the third decided, as if that wrapped it. People love explanations that require no more work. I wanted to believe them. I really did. Then the humming returned at 2:03 a.m., louder, steadier, like a machine relieved of supervision. I got up, stood at the kitchen window, and watched the end house glow faintly at the foundation. That was new, a ribbon of light along the seam where the basement wall met the ground, like the earth had a nightlight. The feeder spun once, though there was no wind. Something moved behind the cedar. I almost called the police, but what would I say? My neighbor's empty house is vibrating? In this city that earns you a nice wellness check and a note in a file you don't want to have. So I did the worst, most honest thing. I went over. The side gate was latched but not locked, the kind of misdirection that feels like an invitation if you're already halfway decided. The backyard smelled like wet metal and electric heat. The humming came from under the deck, where a short door sat flush with the foundation, half hidden by lattice. It shouldn't have looked ominous. It was just plywood and a hasp. But the hasp was new, bright against old wood, and the padlock had been cut. The shackle hung open like a mouth that had lost an argument. I lifted the door. Cool air like a basement sigh exhaled over my hands. A ladder, metal, narrow. I put my phone light between my teeth and climbed down. The space wasn't a basement. It was a room in the way a cockpit is a room, function before comfort. The walls were concrete, the ceiling low enough to teach tall men humility. A folding table held a line of shortwave radios, each tuned to a separate frequency, each muttering a different kind of lonely. Wires braided into the hum I'd been hearing. A spiral notebook sat open to a page filled with times, initials, and short patient sentences. 1:11 a.m. attic blink test. Stable. 2:03 to 2:11 hum from Culvert East. Intermittent. Thursday pickup idles, no plates, no approach. Note for M. If I'm not here by the 10th, you know what to do. I wasn't M. Maybe Ms. K, the retiree who watered everyone's ferns when they forgot. She'd lived here since the city had fewer rules and more trees. She knew which faucets squealed and which raccoons were bullies. If anyone had a letter on this block, it was her. I flipped back. The notes weren't gossip. They were observations, gentle, exacting, weirdly protective. Addresses were written as Blue Door, 2 planters, bike on porch. He kept track of patterns, a jogger who limped at the same crack every morning, a delivery driver who swapped packages between vans, twice, a child who carved initials into brick, once, then never again. On the last page, a small map of our street with 3 circles and a word printed neatly beside a line leading off the edge, tunnel. A ladder. A room. A word that didn't belong in a place like ours. That was the moment I felt it, not fear exactly, but an arrangement in my chest, like chess pieces I didn't know I had suddenly slid into a pattern. I climbed back up and almost ran into Miss K. She stood by the cedar with a flashlight she wasn't using. I hoped it would be you, she said, like we'd agreed on this in a dream. He asked me to keep an eye on the feeder the day he moved in. Said it was where he'd leave the thing for the person who couldn't help themselves. The note, I said. She nodded. And the brick. We went to his mailbox. Brick, squat, the kind that looks permanent until a pry bar teaches it humility. A top brick rocked under your fingers like a loose tooth. Under it, a Ziploc bag. Inside the bag, a key, a prepaid phone, and one more note. If I'm gone, don't write. Don't call. Follow the hum. If the door knocks 3 times, it's not me. We stared at that for a while because sometimes seeing a rule written down is enough to make you believe in the thing it's warning you about. Do we call the police? I asked finally. And say what? Ms. K said softly. That a man who fed sparrows left us a scavenger hunt. They'll ask where the crime is. They'll check the door, admire the neatness, and move on. What did he do? I asked, the way people ask when they need a villain to relax them. He listened, she said. He listened to things nobody else thought were talking. He told me once, people think noise is random. It never is. That night I kept the phone on my table like a tiny sleeping animal. At 1:11, the attic blinked in a house no longer occupied by a man to blink it. At 2:03, the hum arrived on schedule. At 2:06, the prepaid phone vibrated. A text. No number, just a message that felt older than the device it wrote in on. Don't answer knocks. Move your routine by 7 minutes. If the van parks twice, call the city about a gas smell. I didn't understand the third line until 2 days later when a white van with no logo idled at the end of our street, moved away, and then returned at the exact same angle, exact same shade of indifference. I made the call. 2 city trucks arrived within the hour, lights bright, clipboards out, men walking like they owned time. The van left as if persuaded. After that, I started to see what Mr. Hale had been watching. The feeder pattern wasn't for birds. It was a signal read by anyone who knew the backyard like a clock. The attic blink wasn't a quirk, it was a test, a pulse sent into space to see what pulsed back. The humming wasn't failing appliances, it was the tunnel, one of the old storm drains that the city pretended didn't exist anymore, carrying more than water. The thing is, once you start looking, you realize how much of your life is choreography you didn't consent to. I left for work at 8:02 because I always had. I turned left on Alder because I always did. I waved to the same man with the beagle at the same corner because I always will. So I moved everything 7 minutes like the message said. And the world tilted just enough for a pattern to show itself. A silver sedan that used to be behind me was now in front, revealing the dented hides on the passenger side. A woman who never looked up now looked directly into my car when we hit the red on 3rd, then looked down when she realized we'd both noticed her noticing. 2 nights later, the 3 knocks came. Not at my house. At Ms. K's. I saw her porch light bloom on through my blinds, watched her shadow move to the door, watched it stop. The knocks were evenly spaced, 3, then silence, then 2, then 3 again. A man's voice, calm, polite, the kind you hire to read disclaimers, said, "City Services. There was a gas report on your block." I texted "Don't" from the prepaid. The message bounced back with a red exclamation mark, "Send failed." I called. Straight to nothing. No ringing. No rejection. Just absence. Ms. K didn't open the door. The porch light went off. The voice called one more time, added the sound of a pen tapping paper, as if to make the scene official. 2 minutes later, a van rolled away from the curb without its headlights. The next morning we sat at her kitchen table like conspirators and drank tea we didn't want. "He told me they'd be polite," she said. "He said that's how you know to worry, when strangers act like they're doing you a favor." "What are they?" I asked. "Depends who you ask. Contractors. Inspectors. A task force. Or just people who want what he had and don't have the patience he had to learn it." "What did he have?" She touched the prepaid phone between us with 2 fingers. "A head start. The tunnel waited at the edge of the old recycling plant where weeds learned to be trees. You wouldn't notice it if you weren't listening. A culvert, wide enough for a person if the person didn't mind water and dark. Scrapes along the concrete like something heavy had been dragged, carefully, more than once. My light found boot prints that didn't line with anything human. Too careful. Too identical, like a stamp. We didn't go in. He told us not to, in ways that didn't use the word don't but felt like fences anyway. We listened. The hum came on a little higher than before, then dropped, then went still like something had paused to hear whether it was alone. That night, the prepaid phone buzzed again. Not a text. A voicemail, no caller ID. I pressed play and turned the volume down until my ear felt like a safe. "Don't be brave," Mr. Hale's voice said. Calm, almost amused, like he knew how the message would land. "Brave gets you seen. Do the small things. Change your lights. Learn your street by sound. If someone knocks 3 times, it's a recording. If they knock twice and wait for you to step, it's a person. A pause. Street noise somewhere not here. A breath. They'll stop coming if you stop responding. Predators don't like puzzles that change shape. Another pause, softer. Tell the jogger to pick up his foot at the maple root. It's going to get him one day." The message ended with a scrape, something heavier than a phone being set down, and a single word, almost a whisper, "Soon." You can judge me for what I did next, but in this kind of story the only sin is pretending you don't have a part. I made copies of his notebook and hid the original inside the hollow of my water heater where even thieves don't look. I bought batteries for a radio and trained my ear until I could tell the difference between static and a voice pretending to be static. I moved my routine 7 minutes, then 9, then back to 7. I started to hear our street the way he must have, the distinct sound of each neighbor's car, the clink of Ms. K's teacup, the rhythm of a mailbox lid misaligned by a millimeter, the wrongness of footsteps that paused too cleanly at corners. A sinkhole opened on Ridge a week later. The city called it subsidence, as if the earth had decided to kneel to someone else. No one got hurt. But that night, the hum didn't come back. It was replaced by something worse, silence that knew it was suspicious. The van returned exactly 3 nights after that, only this time it didn't stop. It drifted down the block and back, like a shark testing the line between shore and sea. A man walked the sidewalk and took a picture of every streetlight. Another man checked his phone and looked up on a schedule, like he'd been told to appear spontaneous. At 1:11, the attic didn't blink. At 2:03, there was nothing. I stood at the window and realized I missed the hum the way you miss a neighbor whistling out of tune. You don't like it until it's gone. And then, because the universe likes a good cue, the doorbell rang again. I didn't move. The camera showed no one. A second ring. The prepaid phone buzzed with a single word, "No." A fist knocked 3 times, exactly the way a metronome would knock if it had hands. I backed away from the door and watched the shadow on my mat fuzz and sharpen. It wasn't a person. It was the absence a person leaves when a streetlight bends around them. The knocks came again, polite, timed, full of themselves. Then footsteps, wrong because they didn't creak the way my top step creaks, as if the sound had been removed from the world and replaced with an idea of it. The next morning, I found a flyer tucked in my screen door. City utility upgrade, expect outages. The phone number led nowhere. The logo was real, stolen off the internet. The date, circled in red, was a Tuesday at 2:03 a.m. Don't be brave, I told myself. Be prepared. At 1:50, our block went dim. Not black, dim, like someone had turned the brightness down on our lives. Porch lights became moons behind milk. The refrigerator hummed a note I'd never heard it hum. The street lamp did something I didn't know it could, it listened. That's what it felt like, at least. Like the street itself had turned its head. At 2:03 on the dot, the van stopped under the listening lamp. A figure stepped out, bent to the base of the pole, and began to work with a tool that looked more surgical than electrical. Another figure moved to Ms. K's porch and hovered there, making the shape of a person you hope not to meet. My heart raced itself into a smaller animal and then kept going. The prepaid phone vibrated so hard it nearly walked off the table. Feed her now. Stay in the light. They can't stand being seen. I grabbed my brightest flashlight, aimed it at the cedar, and clicked it on. The beam hit the feeder like a stage cue. The metal glowed dull, the seeds inside a pale gold. 3 sparrows. Where did they even come from at 2 a.m.? Landed and pecked like this was the most normal thing in the world. The figure at Ms. K's porch stepped back. The one at the streetlight stood up too fast, startled, as if the beam had embarrassed him. I walked straight into my yard and kept the light sweeping, slow and obvious, like a lighthouse reminding rocks to behave. Hey! I called, loud in the way you're only loud when you need witnesses you can't see. Can I help you? That was the trick, somehow. Not the question, the audience. Predators don't like crowds, even imagined ones. Both figures moved at once, not running but not walking either, the dance of people who won't give you the satisfaction of seeing them hurry. The van rolled away without lights. Power brightened. The refrigerator remembered its old song. The street exhaled. The prepaid phone chimed a last time. Good. Keep the notebook. Change nothing for 2 weeks. Then change everything. I didn't hear from him again. The attic stayed dark. The hum learned a new key, quieter, deeper in the bones of the city. The van came back once at noon, with a logo this time and 2 men who laughed too loudly at nothing. They didn't knock. They drove past and looked at the cedar like it had hurt their feelings. The block settled back into itself, but not the way a book closes and forgets. More like a scar, healed, yes, but honest about what happened. The jogger picked up his foot at the maple root. Ms. K puts 2 lights on now, one warm, one cold, because predators hate mixed color temperature, she says, and maybe she's joking, and maybe she isn't. I learned every neighbor's car by sound. I call the city about imaginary gas leaks when vans park twice. I feed the sparrows at 7:03 and 7:10 and 7:17 because sometimes you protect your home by being predictable in a way that isn't. As for why my neighbor disappeared, I think he left because he knew our street was becoming an instrument someone else wanted to play. Because he heard the pattern change and understood what that meant long before the rest of us learned to listen. Because some people vanish to save themselves, and others disappear to buy you time. Sometimes, when the night is thin and the cedar leans in like it has news, I imagine I hear a voice in the static of my cheap radio saying, soon, in a tone that means, not yet. Sometimes a postcard arrives with no return address. Just a picture of a lighthouse and a single letter on the back, maybe it's him. Maybe it's just the universe playing to my weakness. But I know this much, the knocks never came a 3rd time. The van hasn't parked twice in months. The feeder still turns once for no wind at all, and the sparrows still arrive like they were told. And if the doorbell rings after midnight and the camera shows no one, I sit very still and let the silence know I'm listening.